Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today's webinar, which is co-hosted by myself, Connor Heaney, good friend and partner at WorkLLama, Saleem Khaja. Very warm welcome to you all, guys. Thanks very much for all your questions in advance. We're really looking forward to an interactive webinar today. I think this is the 15th, Saleem, that we've done over the last 2.5 years. So we're on a bit of a roll, but it's always exciting. It's always great to speak and learn on this particular topic. And I think direct sourcing is pretty much on most people's lips these days in terms of how they improve their sourcing and get access to talent. So we're excited to be here, guys. We want it to be as interactive as possible today. There'll be a chat function that you will have access to. So if there's any burning questions, please put them in the chat, and Saleem and I will do the best to address them in a sensible and short form. Also as well, guys, if you wouldn't mind, just in the chat function, if you could just put your name in and your title. We're all friends here, so it's all good as well. So a brief introduction of myself. My name's Connor Heaney. I'm the Managing Director here at CXC Global EMEA. I've been with our business now for 8 years and coming up on 20 years in the outsourcing, MSP, RPO, tech and payroll space. Also host a podcast called the Open Talent Report. It's niche but mighty. Thanks to all of our 10 listeners that do listen. It's very much appreciated. But a very warm welcome to you all today for attending. Saleem, over to you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for your time this morning, this evening, wherever you are. I'm Saleem Khaja. I'm the COO and co-founder of WorkLLama. We are a total talent acquisition, talent relationship management platform for direct sourcing. Again, thank you very much for your time. Look forward to an exciting conversation here.
Thanks, Saleem. Really appreciate it. And folks, just some housekeeping. So again, a warm welcome. We're delighted that you're here. Lots of smiley faces on the text and the chat. We'd love to see that, of course. We're going to run to about 45 minutes with 15 minutes dedicated to Q&A. As I mentioned, though, if there is burning questions, please drop them in the text or the chat, and we'll answer them. Pete Bodo, our co-panelist and our marketing manager for Europe, is going to be managing the chat function. So please get involved. We're recording the webinar as well, so hopefully everyone's okay with that. If not, please raise your hand because we got to record it and let us know. So we'll get to it, but we hope you enjoy it. We hope you learn from today's webinar. And of course, we're excited and very enthusiastic about the future of direct sourcing and where it's going. So with that, Saleem, I think we're going to look at our first topic, which is how do we define direct sourcing, Saleem? Because I noted in the questions in the run-up to today's webinar and show, there seems to be a lot of confusion out there around what direct sourcing is, right? And there's a lot of different organizations calling it different things and possibly for different reasons. But Saleem, what's your hot take on it, please?
Yeah, like you just said, right? We've been talking about this for several years now. Yeah, let's start with, just keeping it simple, right? It's sourcing your contingent labor, leveraging the power of the brand, right? And there are 5 key components to it. So marketing, curation, recruiting, EOR, AOR, and a tech platform. There's this debate on, is curation same as recruiting, or there's different? We view it as different because recruiting is pure transactional activity where you have a job order, you're looking at talent to fill the job order, whereas curation is about segmenting your talent community, nurturing and growing, and making sure you have the right talent in the right place that can be readily deployed, right? So, those are the 5 key components that make up a direct sourcing solution. And in its purest form, other than EOR and tech platform, the remaining 3 functions, which is marketing, curation, and recruiting, right, in its purest form, will be performed by the enterprise themselves, right? And as with any services, these 3 components can be outsourced. And the moment we start looking at this outsourced function, that's when this wonderful world of confusion ensues, right? Because if you outsource all of those, then you start hearing the term, it's contingent RPO. We've been doing it for 20 years, right? Yeah, that's one of the operating models that a direct sourcing solution could use, but that's not necessarily the only operating model, right? Like I said, in its purest form, all those three will be performed by organizations. And there are companies that are doing it themselves, right? And the various operating models, one of these could be outsourced, right? Which is between the marketing, curation, and recruiting. One of those could be outsourced, all of them. So that is where the confusion comes in. And then to layer on top of it, you have incumbent players in your contingent sourcing ecosystem, right? You have your MSPs, you have your staffing suppliers, and now you throw in these services. How do all of them start playing together? I think that's where all of the confusion on what is direct sourcing, how does it work, starts to come, right? And the right answer is any mix of these, right? As long as you're leveraging the power of your brand and trying to source talent with this dedicated channel, right, can be called direct sourcing. But we see that eventually organizations will move into this pure state where majority of those functions will be performed by them, leveraging an AOR, EOR with the tech platform. So, we can keep talking about this on and on, but I want to close with one other comment where, we're starting to see 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and there is truth to it, right? Not from a process standpoint. The process of recruiting is the same. The process of curation and marketing are different, right? This is where the consumerization of talent comes into play, right? A quick analogy is if you think there wasn't any difference between Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and Web 3.0, then you probably want to go do some homework, right? Because as they evolved, they started becoming very personal, unique, and started, becoming more tailored to the experience of the person that's on the web, right? The access of content, the quality of content, how it's delivered, all of those have evolved. And that is what is happening here, right? Again, it's very tech driven. And from a services standpoint, marketing and curation are the components that have evolved, right? So that's why you start seeing the versioning. My thoughts, that's it. Connor,
Yeah, no,
what do you think?
I agree with you. I agree with you on those 5 component parts. I think the way you've set that out is quite clear and systematic, Saleem. And I've been looking at direct sourcing and I see many of our friends and partners here on the call today. And I know many of them are actually practicing or implementing or have direct sourcing programs live. I mean, we partnered with a tech platform in the UK about 8 years ago with Jaguar Land Rover, and then subsequently they partnered with GSK to help manage their independent contractors and source them. So to your point, I don't think it's anything new, but what I do think is particularly interesting about direct sourcing at the moment is the technology that exists and the power of that technology to really do those things that you mentioned, the talent curation, the matching, the talent marketing, the integrations with a vendor management system or an ATS or CRM, and then of course the EOR and payroll component around that. I think there's now exists with technology like yours, Saleem, that ability to have one throat to stroke, right? So it's a systematic candidate experience. It's a systematic user experience for the end client or the MSP that's going to be utilizing platforms like yours. So that's what I think excites me most about it. And then if you couple that with the talent scarcity, the labor market paradox, the declining demographics in Western labor markets versus rising demographics in the continent of Africa, the continent of India, it's incredibly exciting. I feel, Saleem, in terms of the power of it. And I suppose we've got limited time, Saleem, but would you care just to give our audience a bit of an insight into the power of platforms like WorkLLama and really what they can do to help revolutionize potentially or certainly improve the direct sourcing experience for candidates, users alike?
Yeah, so there are again, right, there are 3 components to personalizing this user experience, right? So you have the recruiter experience, or more of the service provider experiences, right? How do you personalize and optimize those experiences, right? And then you have the talent experience, right? So the focus on personalizing and tailoring those experiences to drive efficiencies, right? And automate a lot of the mundane tasks, be it on the internal side, right? Where your marketing teams, the curation teams, the recruiting teams, right? That enables them to be more efficient and provide that next level of service that's required, right? And on the talent side, again, knowing who is it that you're interacting with, right? Like you said, you're looking at a wide variety of demographics, right? And they're now spread across the globe. And we've been talking about borderless talent, right? Therefore, the experience you provide talent in a certain geography where your demographic may predominantly be, millennials, as opposed to, like you said, in African continent where the demographic may be slightly elderly. How do you personalize those experiences, right? So in order to do those kind of things, you need a robust tech platform, and that's kind of what is driving the versioning aspect of direct sourcing, if you will, right? So yeah, automating all of those key aspects, and leveraging AI, and a lot of other plethora of capabilities is what we bring to the table. We can keep talking about our platform forever, but
Yeah.
I'm just going to pause there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, Saleem, and I'm sure our audience have probably found this, but as a solution provider that's essentially selling direct sourcing, or at least the compliance and payroll related services around it, I think when we initially started speaking about this, other service providers exist out there, of course. I think we sold it a bit like the way Henry Ford sold the Model T, that it was going to be cheaper, faster, better, right? And I think all those things in relation to direct sourcing, and direct sourcing done well and direct sourcing done properly, it can be cheaper, faster, better when compared to your traditional recruitment agency supply chain. I think maybe that was oversold, that cost saving piece. Now, of course, there is cost savings there. But in my view, I think the key benefit has changed. Actually, I don't think cost, whilst it's still important, is as big as consideration. I feel that actually it's more about the access to talent coupled with a consistent experience of that talent. Because if you think about it, and I'm sure our audience feels the same, if you've ever had any interaction with Amazon, right? So you had to return a package and you talk to their customer service, well, you don't talk to them, you chat to them. But essentially, that chat function, whether it's human or automated, is absolutely brilliant, right? You feel amazing after it, and most times it's resolved to one's satisfaction, at least in my experience. And if you think about a candidate applying for a job, they might talk to recruitment company Y, recruitment company Z for the same role with the same company, but yet that experience is likely to be highly inconsistent and totally different, right? So when they talk to company Y, recruitment company Y, they might feel bloody brilliant. They talk to recruitment company Z, they might not feel so good. So what I think the benefits of direct sourcing really are is about that consistent experience for the candidate, right? And I think that's so important. And then the second point, the first point relates to that wider access to talent, right? Because why aren't organizations, I know some are, looking inward, right? So are they looking at their alumni? Are they looking at their retirees? We hear this phrase about the great unretiring, about people coming back into the workforce. Like Saleem and team, I look at my own mom, right? She's 63, right? She had me quite young. She probably won't like me saying that, but she retired 6 years ago, but she's back in the labor force again, right? And she's contracting, which is bloody brilliant. But I suppose I'm digressing somewhat in terms of, I think one of the two key benefits, as I see, are access to a wider pool of talent, internally and externally. And then secondly, that consistent experience that I feel that candidates don't get. And I think as practitioners in this space, we can really shine a light on that. Would you agree with that, Saleem, or come at it from a slightly different angle?
No, I think what you said is, aligned with one of the primary research we we commission with SIA, right? The outcome, most often the first thing that comes to mind is cost savings, right? When you think of direct sourcing, you go, okay, I have markup consistency regardless of the role types that I'm hiring for. Since I'm taking on some of the functions, right, the markups will tend to be low. So cost is the first thing that comes to mind, but this SIA research found that it was access to talent was rated as the #1 benefit of direct sourcing. This could be that the people that participated in the survey may be at a different maturity level in where they are in their direct sourcing programs. I mean, there's a really huge percent of companies that are already doing this in different flavors, right? So this outcome, this benefit identified by the survey participants may be because they are in a different level of maturity, but cost happens to be one of the, is definitely one of the benefits that comes out. And like you said, we've always talked about our platform as well as direct sourcing being a solution that gives you access to quality talent in a timely manner at optimal cost, right? It's not necessarily the cheapest, but it gets you at an optimal cost. But the things that are often overlooked, right, are this direct sourcing solution actually acts as a gateway to set you up for success if total talent acquisition, total talent management is something you're pursuing, right? And again, there's a Everest report that talks about how this happens, right? I mean, in simple terms, once you have created a talent community of quality, engaged talent, there's nothing stopping you to leverage that talent community to source any type of talent, regardless of work arrangement, right? So it sets you up for that total talent acquisition, total talent management, right? And it also creates the benefit of an agile organization, right? Something that can quickly react to changing demands and changes in the market itself, right? Other things to also consider or think about is internal mobility, right? Once you create a talent community that includes your existing perm employees who get exposed to contingent opportunities, right? You are then setting an ecosystem up where you're enabling internal mobility, upskilling, redeployment, and a byproduct of that internal mobility upskilling is talent retention, right? And we can keep talking about things like D&I, right? Now that you have your own contingent talent community and you're putting in proper curation measures, right? You can now start curating your talent community to have a proper demographic of talent that helps you achieve your D&I objectives, right? So there are a lot of benefits that don't often get talked about, right? Cost, access, and agility tend to be the 3 topics that people most often talk about, but there's a whole plethora of other benefits that actually are a byproduct of doing this the right way, right? And how you harness these benefits, when, and all those things depend on how you actually go about implementing those 5 key components we talked about, right? UR and tech platform tend to be somewhat of a transactional in this conversation, right? Tech platform, you want to look at holistic, integrated, drives process efficiencies and things like that. But in order to truly harness the advantages or the benefits that I talked about, right, it requires how you go about implementing your marketing, curation, and your recruiting functions. So, those are some of the other benefits besides just cost and access.
So Saleem, whilst you were speaking there, I was thinking about some of the ways that the enterprise organization is typically set up from a technology perspective. So most large enterprises will have some form of HRIS system, a Workday, a Success Factors, the Oracle version of it. I always forget, but it doesn't matter for the purposes of this point. They'll often have an ATS of some description as well for perm or other hiring. And if they've got an MSP, they're most likely to have a vendor management system, of EMS. And forgive all the acronyms, but most people looking at the list on my right-hand side should be familiar with them. So I suppose, Saleem, my question is, oftentimes those technologies do not speak with each other, and there isn't a single view or a single way of accessing or talking to that talent or bringing attention to that talent, the right roles, either externally or most likely internally. So for the benefit of our audience, where should they start, Saleem, when they're going on the journey of direct sourcing, right? So we've identified some of the tech stacks and some of the problems, and so you could suck the information out of that. But where do you start? Where should they start to get a direct sourcing program off the ground?
So, I mean, it's, the best place to start is in the sourcing of contingent workforce, right? So that is I would say, the work arrangement you start with. But the things that you want to do are try to identify job types, role types that have traditionally been easy to fill through your existing sourcing channels, right? So once you identify you're going after the contingent workforce, then you start identifying what are the job types, role types. That also helps minimize, the stress you put on the success criteria on how you measure your program, right? The direct sourcing program, I mean. Right. And if all of the components we talked about, right, the 3.0 is kind of how we want to call it, which is personalization of the experience and all those aspects. If you want to harness and deliver that type of an experience, you need a solution that takes a holistic view into everything that has to do with talent, right? You don't want to go about trying to put together a hodgepodge of point solutions that may or may not talk to upstream systems like your VMSs, right? So you want an integrated solution that can seamlessly talk to your VMSs in real time, where you can truly benefit from, providing that personalized experience, drive marketing efficiencies, right? Drive curation efficiencies, recruiting efficiencies, right? And again, if you're trying to do this in an organization, you are going to be faced with some hurdles, right? And you will be faced with resource constraints. Therefore, it becomes extremely important to find a tech platform that can carry a lot of the burden of these other three components that are marketing, curation, and recruiting, right? If you don't have a proper solution, then one, right, you're not going to be able to provide the type of experience that you're looking for to talent. Two, you'll end up burdening the resource requirements that you need, which means, your internal sponsors may start walking away, right? So that's kind of how we want to look at how you start and what things to keep in mind.
Gotcha. And Saleem, very few organizations have cracked this, and I include our own in this, but how important is spot on resource demand planning in terms of getting a direct source or as close to spot on as possible in terms of getting a direct sourcing program up and running properly?
Well, we said one of the benefits is agility and access to talent, right? So it is going to solve that problem if done properly, right? So yeah, I mean, demand planning is you can only plan so much. That's why they're called plans, and they get reviewed and they get adjusted, right? And one could argue that if one of the value drivers of direct sourcing is agility and access to talent to changing demands, right? Then it will, in a way, solve for, I would say, an average or above average type of a planning activity that you would have. But yeah, the answer is yes, you definitely need to have a plan, because that'll help you in figuring out how you need to curate, right? It'll help you look at your talent inventory and start focusing your curation activities to build the communities in the geographies or the skill types that you need, so you can react to those changing demands. I'm not advocating for no plan at all. You do need a plan, but having a direct sourcing solution helps you, deal with changes to plans.
It's interesting. I don't know what our audience think of this. And by the way, folks, thanks to our audience for joining. I've just been informed by Pete Bodo, who's our marketing Supremo, that the chat function is not working. So if you do have a question, I believe you can raise your hand, and we'll do our best to come to you. Just before I come on to this question, I see Robin Dan from DC Connects. Robin, you've had your hand up for some time, which means you might have a burning question, or it's just on by mistake. But Robin, if you do have a question, we'd love to address it.
Are the audience muted? Maybe.
Yeah, I've just unmuted Robin, but no worries. We'll carry on. Anyway, Saleem, but I was just thinking before we go into the EOR component and how important that is, particularly if you're doing direct sourcing on a multi-region or multi-country basis, or even in countries where the labor law is particularly complex or arduous. But we'll come on to that in a second. But I remember the first direct sourcing program we launched in Europe with our own organization. It was about 4 years ago, and it worked exceptionally well. It was for about maybe 100 heads and 100 people in Poland. And I think it worked so well, at least from our perspective, Saleem, because the roles were all the same, right? They were essentially tier 2, tier 3 help desk analysts based in one central location, the exact same skill set, the exact same job spec. So when we went to market, we went to the local universities, we went under the employer brand or the client brand. I'm not going to say it was easy. There was a lot of hard work, but it was relatively straightforward, right? I'm probably downplaying how straightforward it was, but it was relatively straightforward. It strikes me that where there's repeatable and volume-based roles, direct sourcing should be a slam dunk. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So that's kind of the first exercise, right? You look at, volume hires that your current traditional channels are filling with relative ease, right? And those are the ones you start, switching over to your direct sourcing channels.
And Saleem, just the flip side of that then. So I think where we then struggled, right, was when the client started saying, well, actually, those tier 2, tier 3 help desks, that was bloody great. Well done, guys. But can you get us 5 Java engineers, 3 Python developers on the Django framework, right, et cetera, et cetera. I won't bore the audience with the minutiae. That was much more difficult. So any tips and tricks for organizations that are thinking about sourcing multiple or different role types and not just the volume or repeatable based ones?
Yeah, so there I think one is organically what has happened, right? The whole borderless workforce that helps you get access, and then curation starts becoming critical. And this where I think it's important to understand the difference between curation and recruiting, right? A recruiting person will start going after wherever they can get the talent from, but the role of a curation function is to take, like you said, a demand plan and make sure you have the right talent available in the right place. So if these are the role types you're starting to bring into your direct sourcing channel, have a good curation plan, right? And don't be confined to the geography where you're in, right? And then start building those talent pools in geographies where, this talent is easy to access, right? The quality is good. And then, it leads into your question, find the right EOR that can globally take care of all compliance requirements and put people to work. So the company that's trying to access this talent and a global footprint doesn't really have to worry about all those headaches that come with it. They build a talent pool, they know where they are, don't worry about geography, stop putting them to work, right?
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think in relation to your question, what is the role of the EOR and direct source? And I think it's a critical piece in the puzzle. I think it's critical for 3 reasons, as I see it. The consistent candidate experience, right? That's number one. For the candidate, the experience needs to be the same, whether the candidate's being sourced in Poland and employed in Poland or engaged in Poland, whether it's Germany. whether it's United States, whether it's Belize, whether it's Belgium, whether it's Brazil, right? So that's I think bucket number one, right? That consistent experience. And I think the beauty of the tech platforms like yours, and of course there are other Saleems, but for the moment we'll focus on yours, is that experience can be consistent. And then with the right partner for EOR or payroll or AOR as well, the processes can be mapped to ensure that the experience is consistent. The journeys of the candidate can be mapped to ensure that it's consistent. Of course, the compliance rules vary by jurisdiction, but that can be mapped in to the process as well. So I think that's all good. Number one, unified, consistent candidate experience. What's not to like, right? And if the candidate likes it, the client will like it, right? It's as simple as that. Of course it is, right? And then I think the second point is a more obvious one, and it relates to the complexity in each and every single country. So the labor law, Western Europe, is largely based on common law and common principles. There's a huge degree of divergence. You look at the UK, they're very focused, particularly on things like IR35. You look at Germany, they've got the IUG labor laws around tenure, 18 months. You go to Poland, and there's like 4 or 5 different categories of workers. So I think to do this right, and to do it well, and to do it proper, there has to be a partner that fully understands those complexities and can help the end user navigate those risks and engage those workers compliantly and properly. And then the third thing is the obvious one. It's the payment piece, right? Getting the payments right, getting the payments in the correct currency. If the workers are employed or temporary employed, that the appropriate deductions are made and paid over to the relevant tax authorities. So I think they're really the 3 key benefits as we would see it, Saleem. And I suppose it gives direct sourcing programs the ability to scale in a given location, even if the end client doesn't necessarily have an entity there, but the OR partner does. But I also think it affords access to that borderless talent piece, right? And if you look at the USA, they're pretty much, I think I was looking at the stats according to Bloomberg, I think it's the fullest employment since 1969, right? In the United States, it's as close as it gets to full employment. UK is full employment. Ireland's at full employment. I think Netherlands and Germany also as well. So there's this flight for talent, right? So which emerging markets have the best talent at the best price, right? So in order to access that talent, you need a partner that has the capability to engage or employ or contract with that overseas borderless talent. And of course, if that can be done right, and it can be, it's a game changer. You're solving the talent problem, the talent scarcity problem. What's not to like?
Yeah, I think, like we talked about the 5 key components, right? Marketing, curation, recruiting, tech, and EOR, AOR. I think you can insource and do all of this on your own, but this is a function that will always exist in a direct sourcing program as an outsourced component, right? Because of the co-employment and all those concerns. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those challenges that organizations have to, or a hurdle that organizations have to cross when legal gets involved and you're about to get this program underway, right? And having a proper partner becomes very, very critical. I call this, because I'm a tech evangelist, I call this the boring stuff, but it is the most important stuff, right? In the end, if you can't properly onboard a person in a compliant way and don't pay them in a timely manner, it doesn't matter how great your talent experience is, your talent marketing is, your curation automation, all that stuff really doesn't matter. A person who doesn't get paid is not staying around and is telling everybody in the world, right, the problems they faced, right? So it is a very important function. And some of the labor laws that we hear, I don't know if our friends on the call, where, there are things like if you work 24 hours, I mean, whatever, 10 months, you need to go so many hours. And I don't know, I heard Jan Willem talk about it at dinner one day, and I said, okay, it's too much for me. That's why we have partners take care of it. Tell me about tech problems, I'll solve them for you.
No, I think that's fair comment, Saleem. And what's interesting, I suppose, I know this compliance risk stuff doesn't float everyone's boat, so we'll move on shortly. But there is that regulatory convergence that we're seeing, particularly in the Western labour market. So UK tends to follow USA, European Union tends to follow USA. We're seeing this EU directive on platform work is come into force next year, which is the potential to be quite troubling. I see Chris Booning had his hand up. Oh, he's gone now. Chris, are you there? No. Okay, it's a bit like a seance, isn't it, where you're talking to people and yeah, they're there, but they can't answer for whatever reason. Chris, if you come back, we'll address your question in a sec. So Pete, if you would just move on. Okay. So Saleem, I think we've both been in the trenches, and many of the people on the call today and on the webinar have seen this when they're trying to build a business case internally for direct sourcing. But Saleem, would you mind just giving maybe some of the key flavors of the typical organizational, organizational challenges when it comes to direct sourcing, and who we need to involve from a business case perspective?
I can take the easy route and say poor change management is one of the biggest challenges. And if I say that, I know many people probably are shrugging their shoulders and going, yeah, thanks for that meaningful insight, right? But no, let's look at what are the common concerns you hear, right? So those become challenges, and then we can quickly talk about how you can address them, right? The one big one, I think we talked about it in the previous slides, is the co-employment concern, right? That often comes up. And the other one is, involving the right stakeholders. By that, what I mean is the marketing people are required because you're going to leverage the brand, right? Sometimes you tend to ignore that aspect, and towards the end you discover it, and then you end up running into issues there, right? So involving the right stakeholders, it ties to change management, and the stakeholders being your marketing teams, your HR, TA teams, obviously your procurement, because this tends to be done and run by the procurement teams, right? And legal, because co-employment is a big concern that keeps coming up. And we see where there is a requirement to clearly state on these talent acquisition portals for contingent that, hey, you're not going to be an employee of the brand. They state who is the you are and things like that, right? So that's a common concern that still keeps coming up. The other concern that keeps coming up is, hey, we have a very great relationship with our MSP and our current suppliers. Is this going to antagonize them, right? So that's another challenge. And basically what, the way we tend to look at it is, you will be doing your annual performance reviews, and you will be changing the mix of your talent acquisition, your suppliers, right? As part of that, if you remember, we talked about what type of roles you're moving over, right? So think of this as just fine-tuning your supplier mix. And in the process, you're still keeping your tier 1, tier 2 suppliers and having a meaningful conversation where you're talking about, hey, we're only taking these easy to fill, low markup type of roles into the ecosystem, whereas some of the hard to find complex roles can still stay with you, which means your profit margins are going to be slightly higher than what you're doing. And some of the roles that were going to these underperforming suppliers will now get funneled into you. So there are ways to have this discussion, but that's another challenge that often gets raised in implementing a direct sourcing solution, right? And the other one that we also come across is alignment between HR and procurement, where we have heard discussions on, hey, my talent will get cannibalized to fill contingent roles. It's a comment that we hear from HR, right? So that's where the conversation needs to go, in the direction of some of the benefits we talked about, right? The total talent acquisition, the internal mobility, the upskilling, which drives talent retention, and engaging your perm employees. And I think there was a survey that just got posted today on LinkedIn where there's a correlation between engaged employees and customer retention, right? So these are some of the key parameters for HR, right? Their performance gets measured on retention, upskilling, employee satisfaction, and all those kind of things. So there's a way to have that conversation and address that challenge, right? And obviously business case and ROI tends to keep coming up. I think, Connor, you guys did a great panel sometime last year that talks about how to build this one. But we have one slide that clearly talks about, consistent markup, lower markup across role types. It's pretty simple. It's as straightforward as that, right? And then the next concerns that start coming in have to do with IT functions, right? Where they start talking about, hey, we have a firewall. How does your system integrate within our firewall? Does it sit inside our firewall? This is all nerd talk. So if there are nerds on this call that want to know how we address those concerns, you guys can definitely reach out to us. But that's another area of challenge that you face, right? So legal, antagonizing existing suppliers, alignment between HR and procurement, business case, and support from your IT organization. So the most success you'll find is if this becomes an initiative that is driven from the C-suite, right? And one of the stakeholders that often gets ignored is your CFO. And then that's the money man. You show your business case, a lot of these other stakeholders will start aligning, So
I fully agree. I think we've certainly seen all those challenges, Saleem. The biggest one we find, and Chris, I see Chris is back and has his hand up. Chris, will come on to your question in a very brief moment, but was the use of the brand in the marketplace in Poland. And it was very easy to build the commercial agreement and the cost savings and the methodology and the model. But what slowed down that particular deal, folks, was getting legal to sign off on using X company brand in the marketplace. And they were particularly concerned, well, if you build a landing page for these contingent workers, does that impact us from any risk or misclassification? Of course, the answer was no. So once we convinced legal about the brand and marketing were all in behind it, then it was brilliant. We had the use of the brand and we just went to market. But that was the biggest challenge for us. But it's one that can be overcome with the right buy-in from the key business sponsors in the business. But Chris, you've had your hand up for some time. Chris, it's lovely to see you. Thanks for joining the webinar. What is your question, please? And I hope we can help.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Great. My question is, how does an FMS fit into the picture? Now we have tech like WorkLLama and LiveHire and TalentNet, which are really direct sourcing solutions. We now see an increasing number of also FMS type solutions. I was wondering what's the difference and how do they fit in?
Good question. I'll leave that with Saleem.
Yeah. So, our point of view is your direct sourcing solution is your total talent acquisition channel, regardless of work arrangement, right? Which means FMS ends up being an avenue of sourcing talent, right? So if you look at direct sourcing, your talent channels are job boards as well as your FMS marketplaces. And an FMS is a marketplace, right, where you're trying to match marketplace players with work demand, right? So the work demand is still coming through your direct sourcing channel. So FMS just becomes, for lack of a better term, another job board, right? So your demand gets posted there. You're trying to hire a freelancer, and that's where a player like CXE comes into picture to be an EOR, right? So that's how we look at an FMS platform fitting into direct sourcing channel. But an FMS by itself is not a direct sourcing solution, right? It's a marketplace where you go to source talent for your direct sourcing talent channel. I don't know if that helped, Chris, or.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris, for the question. So, Saleem, what is the difference between talent pools and talent communities in your view?
Yeah. So, call this ignorance or coming into this. We didn't. What I mean by that, we didn't grow up in the contingent talent acquisition space and things like that. We came from a completely different background in 2016, wanting to be an on-demand staffing player, and that evolved into becoming a direct sourcing platform, right? And back in 2019, when I was having conversations with my good friend Katie Bussey, I would always use the word talent communities, because that's what we were trying to build in 2016. We were trying to build a freelancer marketplace, actually, Chris, for high volume warehouse workers. And we called it WorkLLama Community. So that word stuck with us, and we just kept saying community, right? But anyway, that's a little bit of history. And then, the main difference is your talent pools are a subset of what your talent community is, right? Or you may want to think about, let me take a step back. A talent pool is a group of is a collection of resources that have certain common attributes, right? And a talent community is a collection of talent pools where the common attribute that links everyone is the brand that they're associated with, right? And once we start looking at it this way, also this is where your versioning comes into play, right? Back in the day, it was just, I have a database, let me segment it into talent pools, and now just start pushing jobs there, right? As opposed to what's happening now with technology solutions is you're truly treating this collection of your talent pools as a community, which means community type functions become critical to your direct sourcing solution, right? Things like forums. What is it that you're giving to keep the community engaged and nurtured, right? and active. So you can actually go there to pick talent at any time, right? So pools are nothing but a collection of resources, and a community is a true community where people are actually harnessing, people are actually getting something out of it, right? I mean, LinkedIn is a community. Originally, it was just a profiles connecting each other. The moment they started putting all those forum capabilities, knowledge sharing capabilities, and things like that, it became a community, right? So you want to think about your direct sourcing ecosystem you're building as a private label LinkedIn experience, which is your own community. And that's where, the versioning of the technology start coming in, right? 1.0 was segment your database. You know how many people you have with the skills in a given location. Let me start pushing jobs. Whereas 3.0 is, how do I personalize, keep them engaged, nurture them, right? Those are all the things that come into play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we look at pools versus community.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Saleem. I probably summarize it more just with one sentence, but that's probably just my reductive approach to everything. But in my view, the talent community is somewhere where the talent actually wants to hang out, right? They want to spend their time. Now, what's probably attracted to them is two things: the brand and the opportunities that exist with that brand, right? But as we know, as candidates, or if you've ever been a candidate, right? Once you're in a database or a pool, you're getting spammed all the time, right? So I did a project management course, which is on my CV. I did the PMI, let's say 2010, right? I'm still getting bloody spammed emails about project management jobs 13 years later, right? So what I love about the community approach, Saleem, that you guys have built at WorkLLama and other providers, is that it's a place where the talent wants to hang out. Yes, of course, they can get jobs and opportunities there. That's probably the main reason they're there. But they're not getting spammed. They're getting matched with the appropriate opportunity, number one, through the algorithm and the machine learning, which is good. But when they're there, they're actually building networks through forums and communities, and they're learning from other people. There's potential to provide them with courses and upskilling and reskilling opportunities. And I think it's about building that sense of community, right? So what can they learn? What can they earn? What can they contribute to? And I think that's really important as well. You know, even something as simple as, hey, here's a Starbucks voucher, or here's a Nike affiliate voucher. Those things add up, right? All those things are meaningful. And then I think there's something brilliant in your platform, Saleem, that we actually haven't touched on. And it's called multi-level referrals, but that sounds really complex. But just the referral engine that you guys have built is really brilliant to create that sense of community, because when you refer people, I suppose, as a candidate, you've got the opportunity to earn, right? Which is good. Would you agree with that rather simplistic sentence that I put out there, Saleem? And would you care to talk about the referral piece as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you summarized it very well. And you know, this is a community of all talent that works for you, regardless of work arrangement. I think you want to think about it that way, right? Traditionally, talent pools for direct sourcing were looked at as a contingent talent pools. But if you really want to create that sense of community, you want to put everyone who is working for you. Obviously, you need to put in technology that's like AI driven for moderation and things like that. Otherwise, you'll end up, you know, having to hire a plethora of, a really big pool of people to moderate that. Yeah, switching topics to the referral component. You know, it's the hypothesis has always been referred candidates are higher quality talent that tend to stay longer and produce higher, can hit the road running much quicker, right? Because the person bringing them in has certain of their reputation at risk when they refer someone into your ecosystem. And we have actually seen those play out and have numbers that stand behind that hypothesis, right? So, we're seeing referred candidates getting placed on assignments 9 times more likely than talent coming from other avenues, right? We are seeing about 70% reduction in time to place because they're higher quality candidates. They already come with the testimonial of the person that's already working for you, and they already have some sense of the organization they're getting into, right? And also by effectively deploying referral capabilities within your talent communities, right? You're keeping your talent engaged by also treating your community as a place where everyone works, right? You are exposing your contingent roles to your permanent employees and leveraging them as your brand ambassadors to bring contingent workers. Today, perm employees have no visibility to the contingent roles you're hiring, right? So, referrals are a great way to bring talent into your ecosystem, minimizes your reliance on job boards. And I don't know if Chris comes from a FMS company or not, but it reduces reliance on some of the FMS channels as well, right? So yeah, referrals are fantastic.
Okay, what are some of the do's and don'ts? I think we've covered that element in terms of let's not spam them with jobs that are inappropriate for their skill set. Let's look at the candidate's needs, wants, and where they want to work and how they want to work and what they need from the organization that they want to work for. I just want to cover some questions briefly, if we may. I see a good friend of the webinar, good friend of CXC and WorkLLama, good friend of the show, Jan Willem Vyers. Jan, any questions? Anything comes to mind that you want to address? And good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys. I'm just traveling, so I jumped in late. But back to what Saleem was saying already, and I jumped into that FMS part, is that an FMS is, I think, such a good sourcing channel that you easily can plug into your direct sourcing strategy or systemology. So it's only no more, no less, but one of the sources you can use ideally for sourcing, but it's not the direct sourcing part at all. So you can use it, but it's not the solution. So I'm happy to get the floor to someone else because I'm quite experienced in direct sourcing already. So maybe there's a burning question and maybe you can jump in there.
Okay, well, thanks, mate. We do have a question that was sent to us prior to the show. Thanks, Jean-Philippe. Great to hear from you. From Martine. And Martine's question really related to integration pathways into vendor management systems or software. So I think, where there's an MSP and a VMS, the integration and interaction between the MSP, VMS, and the talent pool or direct sourcing tech, I think it needs to be there, right, for it to be done well. It makes sense. Why wouldn't it all talk to each other? So anyway, Saleem, I'll get off my high horse. What's your take on this? Can it be done?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that should be table stakes, right? I mean, if you're trying to harness the true value, right? Quick access to talent, and you want to drive all these process efficiencies and gain the cost benefits that come, right? It just doesn't make sense to not have those integrations, right? And in fact, some of the things that we are starting to look at is, an area that doesn't get discussed when you're talking about direct sourcing is on-demand staffing and shift management capabilities, right? Where your demand actually gets created by your frontline managers on the floor and not in the VMS. And how does that demand flow back into the VMS for visibility and tracking? One of the purposes of VMS is to eliminate as much of the maverick spend as possible, right? If the frontline manager is calling 10 of his friends saying, hey, I mean, not calling because they're friends, he's calling because the person is going to show up and do the work, right? So you need to have a tight integration, two-way integration. Yeah, I mean, can it be done with the swivel chair approach? Yeah, in order to achieve timelines, maybe you start there, but integration is an absolute must. Connor, I'm going to frustrate you by going back to the do's and don'ts of nurturing.
Yes,
I think we talked about a lot of the different pieces, right? But the key is, it's not one size fits all. It needs to be uber personalized. If you're talking about your global, borderless talent communities, then you can't have the same talent experience. We've talked about all these key components, but one thing I want to leave with here is think of this as a marketing function for talent, right? Follow the same principles that you follow when you're trying to nurture and treat, how you nurture and treat your customers, right? How you acquire them, how you personalize their experience, how you personalize the engagement, and take those same principles and apply towards talent. And if you start thinking about it that way, then you get all the answers on the do's and don'ts. Whatever you do and don't there for customers, do and don't with talent.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Saleem, and a lovely way to finish. So, Pete, thanks for brilliant. Next step. This is what we want, guys. So, as we mentioned at the top of the webinar and the show today, we have built a wealth of webinars, white papers with WorkLLama, Talent Tech Labs. Saleem and his team have done various research papers with SIA. If you want to understand more about direct sourcing, about building a business case, about implementation pathways, about the power of integration into VMSs, please scan the QR code and you'll be able to find out more about how potentially we can help. And if we can't help, at least there's a pathway there amongst all our research and various collateral. So with that, Saleem, really, thank you very much for your expertise and your time. It's always a pleasure to do these with you. Your wealth of information, your platform's amazing, but also thanks so much to our audience today. Thanks to everyone for taking an hour out of your day. It means a lot to us. We hope you found it helpful. We hope you found it useful. Any comments, please email our team. We'd be happy to address them and follow up. So have a great afternoon or morning ahead, depending on where you are, and look forward to our next webinar. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.